Welcome to the NJ Criminal Podcast.
Continuing in our cannabis series, we have Bill Caruso here to speak about cannabis law. Bill is a founding member of the New Jersey United for Marijuana Reform Steering Committee and the General Counsel for the New Jersey Cannabis Business Association. He leads Archer Law's Cannabis Law Group and is part of a select group of attorneys chosen to advise the state of New Jersey on the intricacies of marijuana legalization, taxation, and regulation. Bill, welcome.
It's a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. So just to kind of give a broad stroke summary of where we are in the timeline of the state's efforts to bring adult use cannabis to market. Following the November 2020 vote, February of 2021, the CREAM Act, which is the Cannabis Regulatory Act that went into effect and established the New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Commission, along with all the regulations for recreational cannabis. That was in February 2021. And then it took a little bit of time to finally get to the point in March and April of this year, 2022, to have adult use sales begin. You were involved throughout that year and a half or so process, correct?
Yeah, and it really depends on when you put the start pin in. But I've been involved with this for many moons, if you will. But when we got past the ballot question, when we got the approval from the voters, there was still a lot of work to do after that, moving an enactment vehicle and moving at a very difficult time post-pandemic or in the middle of a pandemic. And then the regulatory implementation. But I would say to you that on the regulatory implementation side, that's the part that we've seen really us hitting the gas pedal now. I know there's been concerns and complaints and some gnashing of teeth in the spring about the delays in getting adult use started. But if you really look at the time that new commission, brand new commission, was seated to when we've actually seen awards of new licenses, new RFAs going out, an entirely new rubric created, staffing, as Jeff Brown likes to say, building the plane while they're flying it, and then actually turning on the first adult use sales in the state of New Jersey in less than a year. It is kind of impressive, although a long time coming to get to that place.
Right. I mean, were you surprised or not surprised at that length of time? Do you think folks anticipated in February of 2021 that it would take till now to get all the pieces in place?
It depends on who those folks are. I think people that went to the ballot in 2020, overwhelmingly, right, more than 2/3 of our voting public went to the ballot in 2020 to support this. Some of them thought they'd be able to go to the store the next day. And so I think it's a little bit of it's been an odd education among cannabis users and constitutional and branches of government and how they interact. But I think if you look at people that are kind of students of government to see from when the bill was passed and signed into law, then that quick fix regarding parents was then changed. And then the seating of a new commission, staffing of a new commission, development of a regulatory rubric around very complex new statute, that was where you really saw some lightning change and some movement. But I still think there are a lot of folks that were dismayed over the fact that it took till April of this year for the first adult use sales, where you can walk into a storefront now and purchase adult use cannabis products and pay taxes on those and do it in the environment that we had advertised. There are people that had some concerns. It took too long.
Right. Now, there are in the law 6 classes of licenses, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And as of right now, and I think I kind of stumbled over the CREAM Act. It's the Cannabis Regulatory Enforcement, Assistance, and Marketplace Modernization Act, which is now being known affectionately as the CREAM Act. Provides for those 6 licenses. As of right now, there are licenses available for only a few of those. Can you describe that
Well,
for us?
yeah, and let's, before we get to where we are now, let's just jump in a quick wayback machine here. What we have, the folks that are open and selling adult use cannabis products right now are not those classes. They are the Uber class, if you will. They're a vertically integrated entity that was created pre 2018. Those folks have been open for some period of time in the medical space. Not all, but some now have been able to convert in adult use space. So what we've seen is the current verticals. There were 12 of them have converted now for the most part. Each of those were allowed up to 3 additional retail. So they had for a total of 3. Those are the folks that are open right now. Now, in the wings is the 2019 round that was finally awarded last year at the end of October, and then the end of the year for some of the standalone retail. There were more vertical there. Those are only medical right now. Some of those are opening as well. They're open, but they're locked in the medical space under the regulatory rubric set forth by the CRC. Then we come to the new folks, and in December, the CRC opened a round for 3 of these license classes, standalone cultivation, and there are different types of that. There's a micro, there's a conditional, and then there's an annual license. And similarly, there's a processing, manufacturing license, again, micro, conditional, and then annual. And then standalone lab. We have this first of the kind third-party lab. Those were open, that round opened in December of 21, and then a retail round opened in March of 22, and we've already started to see the CRC begin awarding conditional awards. I think only conditional at this point, in the cultivation, manufacturing, and now retail space in the adult use rounds that were just opened. So you're seeing a lot of activity going on in New Jersey cannabis right now.
Yeah, and that's why I'm glad that you're here to describe and explain all this to us. And I should say that the Regulatory Commission has a great website and has this timeline set forth on it. And as you've described, so and correct me if I'm wrong. So the individuals that up until very recently that are selling cannabis, for adult use, were those individuals or those businesses that had medical marijuana licenses previously. Is that accurate?
It is current. The
Current.
only folks that are currently open right now were the previous medical, the large vertically integrated operators that were pre-2018.
Got it. And then, as you just explained, in December, applications opened for these cultivators, manufacturers, and testing labs. And now then, just most recently in March, applications were opened for dispensaries and other kind of conditional business applications. Is that right?
Yeah, for dispensaries, I mean, we haven't really gotten to home delivery yet. We don't really have the warehouse and distribution license components out there available yet. I mean, and we can talk about this. There are some things that are now pending at the CRC that are kind of burning and becoming more urgent, whether they're regulatory items to expand edibles, including more food items. There's a whole question related to employer guidance and what the CRC was tasked by the statute to decide who is impaired and who isn't impaired, and that's taken on a new life through the AG's recent guidance. So there's a lot of stuff pent up at the CRC beyond just doling out awards. But I think they focus right now as much as they can on getting new folks into this market as quick as they can. They really want to build this industry up, not just the large players, but allow this craft cannabis component that we've advertised as a component for New Jersey to really start to flourish. So they're doing a lot of spinning plates at the commission right now.
Why the conditional licenses? Was that just a way for the state to kind of get things going?
Well, it's an interesting component. New Jersey's a home rule state, so start there. And from the statutory, sort of efforts, trying to move around home rule would have been the third rail of politics. So, allowing a cannabis dispensary to be open in a town without town approval really wasn't politically palatable. But what the conditional applicant is advantaged with, and these are income caps. So if you don't have the resources to hire a team of lawyers and lobbyists to go figure out where you can go in a different town, or you don't have the resources to hold real estate right now, is another expensive component to a cannabis application. This commission has allowed you to apply for a conditional license, which negates the ability to have site control or local approval for this portion of the application process. So the folks that we've seen thus far that have come out have not had to have a place locked in. And the idea here is they come out, they get an award now, and they can go around to a town and say, we've been blessed by the CRC. We are going to be licensed if we can find a place and we can, get open. And it also is the ability to attract capital into the game then with an award as you're, a little further down. So that's the model. We're going to see how that ends up because we actually got real world ability to track it now with the applicants that have been awarded thus far.
So it's a preliminary type of approval.
It is, and it's an experiment, by the way. I mean, there's been some criticism thrown at this. I like the concept, but what you also have is a bunch of annual applicants that have done their work and they've tied up land and they've tied up approvals. Some towns have limited the amount of licenses that are going to be granted out on a local level. And so you're going to have this, sort of bumping in of interest where there's a lot of conditional applicants that are coming out with an award from the state, but no match at the local level and no land. And then you have people that have done the work at the local level and they may have land or real estate and they don't have approval at the state. And we're going to figure out how to match all that up. That said, I will tell you the good news is every single day, since adult use and even before then, we're seeing more and more towns opt into this now. The experiment is not been as scary. The retail traffic has been not only manageable but beneficial for towns that had their downtowns decimated during COVID. So there are going to be lots more fresh opportunities out there for people that are coming out with an award that may not have, had a town that even had opted in at the time they applied.
6 classes of licenses, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Grower,
Mm-hmm.
processor, wholesaler, distributor, retailer, delivery, and then, of course, the testing lab licenses. As of right now, only applications for grower, processor, and retailer classes 1, 2, and 5. Is that accurate?
And lab.
And lab, correct. Can you, and where are we in terms of the state beginning to accept applications for those other 3 classes, class 3 wholesaler, class 4 distributor, class 6 delivery?
We're getting there, but like I said, I think if you sat at a table inside the CRC right now, those are probably not the high priority items. I think the priority items right now are continuing working through, for example, managing the adult use and medical markets that are open right now. The CRC announced, I think last week or the week prior, that they had levied fines against some of the adult use folks because they had violated some of the rules. They want to make sure that there's a continuing supply and access for medical patients while the adult use market. So if I had to pinpoint the priority for the CRC right now, it's making sure that this market continues to be the success that it is. By the way, they also just announced they peeled back, as per the statute, the state sales tax on medical marijuana. There is no more sales tax on medical marijuana now. So the administration and management of the program, priority 1 right now, scoring and moving the current operators through the process. Remember, you have an entire round of 2019 medical folks that are about to open retail, grow, and 4 verticals. So those folks are moving through a process. The tricky part now is they have other regulatory needs, including going back and updating what they put out last August. Remember, it was just the end of August of last year they developed the regs, and then coming back and also dealing with employer issues and a growing need to kind of put some meat on a bone on what an edible program in our state is going to look like. So we don't have a big market yet that's going to need the distribution warehouse piece that I think there's not the really demand. If you're looking what's the front burner item for this commission, that's not the demand right now. It'll come. That's not to say, by the way, that the home delivery piece isn't going to become an important issue, and I don't want to leave that out. They're already dealing with a pilot effort on the medical level. There are several medical providers right now that actually have a delivery program up and running, but you're going to see a more robust application process now for home delivery companies. I think that is coming next too.
So Class 6 cannabis delivery, that refers to home delivery?
Yes.
Okay, got it. What are the regulations related to the current retailers that were medical marijuana dispensaries are now allowed to also basically sell to other adults? Is there a percentage that they have to put aside for medical marijuana? You mentioned that there were some bumps in the road with some folks not following the rules. What are those rules?
Well, the number one issue that I think most of these folks have bumped into is they were required to have separate hours, and they were required to have separate access, including separate parking. And I think the inability to manage those efforts is what got most of the dings from the fine perspective, as they were running into the hour problem.
Yeah, they had hour-long lines around the block, right?
Yeah. Well, and the hour-long lines around the block for the adult use patient, no one really cares about. In fact, a lot of mayors are actually looking, as long as they're manageable. But it was making sure that there was never an hour-long line for a patient line, and there was special access. And I think that's where some of these folks got flummoxed. There were also requirements on patient-only hours, where you could not have anyone there for adult use purposes and purchases. Some of it was technical screw-ups, though, where a patient would come in and want to purchase something off an adult use menu that wasn't on a medical menu, and they weren't able to do that, or if they did do that, that triggered a fine. So some of this is ironing out some small points that probably were not within the spirit of the law, but might have triggered a letter of the law. The big issue, though, that this CRC has been focused on is they've been reluctant about turning over the adult use effort for the current medical operators for whatever reasons they were reluctant. And I think the big concern was supply, and we haven't seen that really yet. I think we were worried that there were going to be places that were going to be forced to close because they were run on supply, and so far it seems to be working pretty well. The concern right now is the big dip in medical patients. There's a disincentive to be a patient right now because you can just walk into a store and buy adult use products. You do get discounts as a medical patient. You actually have a tax break, as I mentioned earlier. But they're trying to figure out more incentives to continue to get patients to subscribe to the medical program.
Understood. Does the Cannabis Regulatory Commission have like folks on the ground that go around and inspect the different dispensaries, kind of like the ABC does for alcohol? They
do. They have an entire investigative body. And in fact, they make site visits regularly. They're part of their regular effort. They obviously have a testing component. Each of these folks previously were tested at the state lab. Now they're allowed to use third-party labs. So there's requirements that they're supplying their testing. There's also complaints, and the CRC fields complaints, whether it's from a customer or patient, or local government or something like that. The CRC is responsive to a complaint that may come into them.
You mentioned a few minutes ago that the first conditional recreational business applications have been approved. So essentially what you're saying is that license applications for retail businesses that were not involved in the medical marijuana scheme, for lack of a better term, back in 2019 have now been approved. Are they open and running, or are they just still in the process of approval?
They're in they just got out of the gate at the CRC. I think the first ones were approved like about a month ago for retail. Obviously, the cultivation began earlier this spring, cultivation and processing. But I'm not aware that any are open, up and running, or even through local approvals yet. Remember, these folks, and listen, I'll say the word cheat, but I don't mean it that way. Mm-hmm. There were conditional applicants that just filed as a conditional applicant because they could, but had site control and probably a piece of land. There are going to be those. They didn't have to file with it. So they're probably the ones that are closest to opening, but I'm not aware that anybody is open and in the adult use space yet, other than the current vertically integrated operation we talked about previously.
Thank you for listening in. Stay tuned for the next part in this conversation. This podcast is not a source of legal advice. No two legal cases are the same. Contact an attorney if you require legal assistance.